Hello everybody, how's it going? I am here with a new video for you today. Today we're looking at Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Now this is the long-awaited continuation of the Crash Bandicoot series. We got the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, a couple years before this one came out. And so, Crash Bandicoot 4 came out on October 2nd, 2020. It only came out on PS4 and Xbox One. The exciting thing is recently, March 12th of this year, 2021, they not remastered, but they just made some upgrades for the PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and then the Nintendo Switch, so that it could run on those consoles. Now, I'm a big PlayStation fan, especially when I'm looking at Crash Bandicoot, a game that started on the original PlayStation way back when, and so I felt inclined to play Crash 4 again. I played it for the PS4, but I thought, let's see what's upgraded for the PS5. So, the game looks really great, but something that really was interesting to me in a platforming game like this was the fact that they did feel the need, the compelling something, the rationality, I guess, to add the adaptive triggers. And so, if you don't know, the Dualsense controller for the PS5, it has adaptive triggers, so it can, be harder to press sometimes, or it'll have different effects like that. Today, I want to look at this feature, see how it's used, and take a look and see, was it worth adding in the end? So the first thing I want to look at, why even bother adding these features? With the DualSense adaptive trigger, like I said before, it's basically you can press it and then, maybe it takes an extra little push to get it pressed all the way down. Maybe it's a long push instead of just a really quick reflex. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, and so the main reason I would think that they would add these features is just to show off the DualSense more. Crash did originally come from Sony, it came from the PlayStation, and so having these features in the controller and in the console, it kind of makes sense to try to add them. It is a platforming game though, and so that's what's really weird to me. It does have some kind of non-platforming sections that are still platforming sections, but we're going to get into some of the different ways that you use the DualSense adaptive triggers. So the first way I want to get into the adaptive triggers, I want to talk about riding, right? So we have jet skis, we have polar bears, we have weird little alien creature things, I don't know. But we have all these different things that we ride in the game. And so what's interesting is with all of these different things, there's a boost feature. So this was one of the ways that they thought to include the adaptive triggers, is when you want to use the boost, it's a little more pressure to push it down. You gotta kind of click it in there. So what's interesting about that is just the fact that they used it and that they found this way to use it. I think most people, especially playing the old games that they also have this same feature, I wouldn't even have thought about adding the adaptive trigger here. And so looking at it from that perspective is just kind of like, why did they do that? Was it worth it? Again, as I mentioned before, the main why would be, hey, we have the DualSense, let's do it. But adding it here does give you that little feeling of, oh, I'm trying to boost. I can imagine in racing games, I don't think there's any racing games that feature the adaptive triggers yet, but I can see in the future that feature being added. And then if it's a racing game that has something like Nitro in it, maybe hitting the NOS, you're gonna have the same effect as you do here. And so, it is interesting. It's not quite platforming in the same way, but it does have a lot of those interesting features that make sense for how it could be used in the future and kind of show that off a little bit. Now, the other main way that we see the adaptive triggers being used in this game is with the shooting and vacuuming features, and so that makes sense in a second. With Tana and Cortex, two characters you can play as in the game, you kind of shoot something. With Cortex, it's a lot more literal. You have a laser gun that you shoot. With Tana, it's a hook shot that you shoot, grab onto stuff, and you can go over there. With Dingodile, the third extra character besides Crash and Coco that you can play as, you have this vacuum that's used to suck up items. It can suck up boxes, enemies, a whole bunch of different things. So what's interesting about the adaptive trigger here, all three of these examples are a little bit different. Dingodile is the most different of the three, because that's kind of that slow press that I mentioned earlier. It's not really quick, hitting the trigger, it's a very slow press to get the vacuum up and running. And so that's pretty interesting how they did that. They also have a little bit of the rumble in there during that effect with its rumble features in the controller, so that you can kind of feel the vacuum and feel like you're, pressing and trying to get the vacuum to suck up. So that's kind of interesting. Cortex with the laser gun, it's fairly traditional, I would say, in my opinion, of if you played, Call of Duty Cold War on the PlayStation 5. They have a similar thing with a lot of their guns. Pretty much all their guns have some sort of adaptive trigger action, and so the Cortex laser gun kind of shows that similar thing. Tana's hookshot is kind of like Cortex's laser gun. It's a little bit different just because the way it's pulling is a little bit different, and then the release is a little bit different as well, but overall it's again kind of that gunshot feel, except when you come back up it's a little different. These three examples, the Tana and Cortex, the hookshot and the laser gun, they're really similar to stuff we've already seen with the adaptive triggers, especially like I said in Call of Duty. The real interesting one here, I would say, is Dingodile with the vacuum. And again, I actually go into racing games with this a little bit, where, if you're looking at a racing game, you can have that slow press to slowly increase your speed. And so, instead of pressing all the way down very, very quickly and just waiting to catch up to speed, the adaptive trigger can make it so that you have to slowly, press it down and down and down to get up to speed. And then when you fully press it down, you're a lot closer to maximum speed. Just something interesting, I think, about it. Overall, it is interesting in this game to have these extra features. They don't ruin the game by any means. They don't ruin the gameplay. It's just something a little extra. So the main question here, was it worth adding these adaptive triggers to Crash 4? Like I said, this originally came out for PS4 and Xbox One, so when they made these upgrades, was it worth it? Was it worth the time? For me, personally, I can say yes and no. I think yes, because it does show that they put some care into it. They worked to make these upgrades. They didn't just slap stuff together willy-nilly, they actually went through and tried to use the full power of the console. I would hope for the Xbox Series X and Nintendo Switch, they've added features as well to really enhance the game. I haven't played those versions of the game, so I can't say a whole lot about it, but it makes you really think the developers care about what's going on. The reason I would say no, it's not worth adding the adaptive triggers is just because it doesn't really do a lot in the long run. This is a platforming game first and foremost, so I don't care if shooting Cortex's laser gun has an adaptive trigger. The riding sections of the game, the boost, I will say this is maybe the one part where I do think it's worth it, as far as that's concerned. I like the boost having the adaptive trigger because it shows that it's a little bit extra effort to get it through. But with all that being said, what do you think? Do you want adaptive triggers added to more games? Do you think it's worth adding to these games? Do you think it's a useless feature, a useful feature? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hey, if you like what I'm doing here, like this video, if you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. Help me get those numbers up. It's very helpful, will always be helpful, and I'll always appreciate it. With all that being said, thank you so much for hanging out and watching this video with me today. I hope you have a good one.